Hey, shalom everybody, this is Chris Shoemaker, also known as Yehuda Ben Shomer, and my very special guest and my good friend I have with me today is Scotsman Angus McQuade, the Scottish sage. That was a little
Sean
Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery. Everyone can do Sean, right? But no, it's I'm grateful to be here today and to, you know, sharing a few of the thoughts. You and I have been friends for a lot of years, and yeah, it's Angus McQuade. Yeah,
the Scottish sage.
Scottish sage. I get that, I think, more over here than I do at home, but it's good to be in Canada today and to come across the pond. It's a beautiful country, and it reminds me a lot. I don't know if you've been to Cape Breton, but in the Highlands, it reminds me so much of home. You know, the Scottish Highlands. But
well, you know, after all, we have a province called Nova Scotia, and it basically means New Scotland.
Yeah, I can see that as well too. You see it in even some of the buildings and some of the history that they carry. There's a great number of Scots
well, in here in New Brunswick, even though you don't see people running around with kilts all the time, we do have a gathering of the Scots in Perth Andover, usually in the month of May. So, you know, all the kilts from, you know, the Scottish and the Scotch-Irish, they all kind of congregate, and, you know, they do the Highland games, the caber toss.
Yeah, and we've heard of that over home as well, and got information. Of course, the internet now and the computer, the world's a lot smaller than it was, but yeah, it's quite impressive. They've got a gentleman, I believe, by the name of Kirk Gibson, that's his name. I think.
Dirk Bishop.
Dirk Bishop. Well,
yeah, he's one of the border crossing guards on the Canadian side,
that's good,
and he was a champion several years in the Highland Games for gathering the Scots.
Man. We'd have gentlemen that size, good strong lads that we as well would put along the borders. So it kind of that sounds fitting. But apparently he could throw a caber quite well.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. And also the. I don't know, it's like a shot put, you know, the ball.
Right, yeah.
And then the hammer throw and all, man, it's just amazing stuff.
But probably some have seen some of this in the movie Braveheart, I guess would be.
Yeah.
You know, when people think of Scotland, probably on this side, they think of Mel Gibson playing that part in Braveheart. But
yeah.
And I notice your kilt. I appreciate the fact that we're wearing kilts today.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, even though that I'm Jewish, you know, I've got a little bit of Scotch-Irish in me. The Shoemaker clan was a Germanic Mennonite clan, but they married in to the McClung family line, and they were originally from the lowlands of Scotland, and they immigrated to Northern Ireland, to the Ulster province. And I couldn't find a McClung tartan, but this was the closest tartan I could find to the Ulster province that I was able to get.
Well, not only that, but it certainly matches, the colours match your shirt as well as your kippah as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, and well, now yours, from what I understand, it's called a clergyman's kilt, which is a neutral tartan. Exactly. In other words, there's no clan that has that tartan.
Exactly. You've been doing your research. I can see that. Eh? So that's good. Keeping up on your Scottish heritage. Yeah, exactly. The blue represents, as you said, the clergyman. And while you mentioned that, it's almost like, it reminds me, again, it was neutral because in battles or things, they could spot the clergyman. A lot of times in battles, they'll need a clergyman's help.
Yeah, you know, a clergyman's tartan is almost like wearing one of those Kevlar vests that says press on it. It showed, don't shoot this guy.
Well, I think that, now I haven't been in battle, but you know, from history that, It did. You know, you kind of left. He was looked at like a holy man, so you left him maybe to the end of the fight, possibly. I don't know, but it comes to my mind that that's very similar to, in a way. Now, you being Jewish would know far more than I, but it almost is, in a sense, when God had the children and the tribes in the wilderness, and He gave them the lots of land and separated them, and you have the accounts and the number of the forces that they used and everything in I believe Chronicles Deuteronomy as well.
Yeah.
And so the tribe of Levi was not given a lot of land. They were given the task of looking after the tabernacle and everything within it. And they were the spiritual leaders.
Yeah, they had no inheritance in land. They only had the inheritance in service.
Right. So a little bit like this, God did that to separate. So when the children of Israel would say go to battle, they'd be looking for blessings. And certainly the Levites were set aside for that. So it's a little bit similar in a way to the clergyman's, a little bit.
Yeah, and kind of leading right on into that, you're talking about tribes and clans, and that kind of leads into families and the family unit. And from what I understand, that's kind of what you want to talk about today.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a big subject, and takes hours and hours, and there's a lot of brilliant people in the world that are trying, all different cultures have different ways and different values that they'll use, right? The Far Eastern culture, I think a lot of people like the Japanese culture when it comes to family, because it's in that culture that they give great respect, we'll say, to the elders, etc. Yeah. And anyway, you see every culture is different. And I think within North America, it's known as the melting pot of the world. And, the talk of immigration and different ethnic groups as well. And I think there's a great problem and a struggle within North America, within the family unit.
Well, and you're speaking about immigration, and this kind of ties in with the family. Being the melting pot way back when in Canada and the United States, when you had the Irish and the Scottish and the Italians and people from all over the world immigrate to Canada and America, they kept alive their culture, their language, their heritage within the home. But when they were out in society, they blended in through language and dress and occupation with the Canadian and American culture. And we're not seeing so much that today. Everybody's wanting to be so individualistic, and they almost take it as an offense if, a Muslim can't wear a hijab in public or something of this nature. And, I know that kind of plays a role in what we're talking about here.
Well, we don't have that problem where in my homeland as nearly as much as here. Now, maybe it's because we don't have the influx of immigration or the ethnic. Now, we do within the cities. We do around Glasgow and so forth. But out in the rural country areas, you don't have as much varying differences as I'm seeing here. For example, the divorce rate is not even close to. In Scotland, it's not as high as it is here. Not by.
And why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the Scotchman being able to hold his liquor, and therefore when he gets frustrated, he can drink himself silly, so he doesn't remember all the pain of the marriage?
Well, it could be. It could be. I think it's in. I don't know if it's the Book of Psalms, but there's a passage I read not long ago, and I'm terrible for maybe not putting it down. It is highlighted in one of my the Bible that I use for devotionals, but there's a verse in there talks about giving strong drink to those who are grieving and those who are in trouble with a troubled soul. Yeah. So it does have its place and build courage, I guess, as you would say. But
seriously, how is the marriages? How's
I think what we have in Scotland, at least, again, from the county that I'm from and where I've lived in, I grew up in a certain way. My father did things and my mother did things in a certain way. And as well, so you build those values when you have your own family.
And you pass them down.
We pass them down because there's not a lot of changes within society that we see in Scotland, at least again in the rural areas, as you would see here. And divorce rates, and I'll give you an example, is when I grew up, my mum and my dad were the ones, my dad would go out and work in the fields, and when my brothers and I were growing, we would go out and work with them as well, in the fields, and do the hard work, and fish, and dry the fish, and do whatever we had to do. and my mom would stay in the home and take care of all the things there, the cooking, the washing, the taking care of our wounds, and
But there was respect in that. It wasn't she was barefoot and pregnant and a slave. She had a very important job and a very important role. I mean, she was looked up to and respected because of that.
Exactly. We didn't look at any roles per se as you see here, because I think once a family, maybe it's part of the problem here is you're trying to define certain roles on in one sense, and then as well there seems to be a confusion dealing with masculinity.
Yeah.
You know, I think it tends to be more on the masculine side, because I don't know what the statistics are, but I heard some a while back, it's very alarming, that I believe close to 40%. Now people can check the facts. Google does well in checking facts, but to research it. But I believe it's something like 40% or above of children growing up, young men in particular, without a father. You know, and I find that alarming. We don't have that in Scotland. I think if you did the statistics all around, I think you'd probably find that the United States and possibly Canada as well have those what I would consider to be alarming statistics, because it takes a mom. I mean, I grew up in a strong family. I saw strong families around me, and there wasn't a lot of, for example, I never could ever imagine that my mom would be put down because she raised 6 of us.
Yeah.
You know,
that she stayed in the home and your father went out in the fields.
Exactly, because predominantly that was the same. Because we didn't grow up. We were not wealthy at all. So, you know, families around us in the community, in the counties, for all that I would know, grew up the same as I did. You know, we all had moms that, you know, looked after the house, and then there was also a dad that went out.
And I think there's a big misconception in regards to what masculinity is. When people here in the West think of masculinity, they think of somebody that is brash and that is harsh and that has to be mean, and you know it's just this machoism, and that's not masculinity. You know, might makes right. In other words, is what a lot of people think, because you know, I mean, if you watch Braveheart, and I know that's kind of stereotypical, but they were warriors. And they were tough and masculine men, but they weren't ashamed to cry. They weren't ashamed to show their emotions. They weren't ashamed to be tender to their children and to their wives. And I think that's what's missing is masculine role models for these young men. Now, I was fortunate enough to have a dad, and you know, but my dad had an issue. His father died when he was young. So he didn't have a dad. So he didn't know how to be a dad.
Exactly.
So he looked at his brothers and other men in the community for his masculine identity. But my dad was able to instill in me a proper, biblically balanced view of masculinity, and it's made me the man that I am today. So I'm not afraid to, you know, fight if I have to, but I'm also not afraid to cry and show my emotions and be loving and tender to my wife and my daughter.
Exactly. And that seems to be, from what I can tell, that seems to be the problem. And for all the research and smart people out there that are trying to get it together, it seems to be falling apart even worse. Yeah. I think the biggest, to me, for my opinion, the biggest single fault that I would see, or the biggest instigator of this particular problem within the families, starts with a spiritual base. You know, you believe in Jesus Christ as well as I do, and there's a lot of different religions. I suppose it's up to the individual to pick the one he wants, but I picked the gospel of Jesus Christ because I believe what he said when he said he was the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah, tell me what you said to your son. You went to a passion play that depicted the life of Yeshua the Messiah. And, you know, a lot of people look at Yeshua as just this skinny, mamby-pamby, you know, weakling and guru that went around teaching, when he was a carpenter, which meant he didn't only work with wood, he worked with masonry, stone. So he was pretty defined muscularly. He walked everywhere he went. And when they came to that place where they put Yeshua on the cross, tell me what happened with your son and what you said to him.
Well, we watched, it's funny we mentioned Mel Gibson just a few minutes ago, but Yeah, we went to see the Passion, and the theater was packed, and I believe it was held over. It was one of the movies that was held over the longest, you know, and a tremendous film. But as we're sitting there, and my son, maybe in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have taken him because it's a violent film. And Mel, you know, Mr. Gibson pulled no punches, and I'm glad because it affected people's lives to see that type of violence. But my son, just when they were placing Christ on the cross and when they were ready to lift it up and thump it down into the hole, you know, and I knew that would be a dramatic moment, you know, that thud down into the hole. And he got up and he tried to walk. I was sitting by the aisle, and he tried to get past me. And when he did, I put my arms out to stop him because it was such a crucial part in the movie, and everything was quiet. And I grabbed him by the belt loop, and he was struggling to get away. Finally, I guess there was one seat before the aisle, so I pulled him down, and I said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I got to go have a wee, Dad." And I said, "You can't do it now. Hold it. Just for a few minutes. Hold it, right?" And I'm trying to whisper. And as I get close to him, I realised he's crying. Like, the tears are coming down his cheek, and he's greatly affected by the violence that he's seen. Now, he was raised in the church, and I suppose the lad was around 11 or 12. I can't remember. But as he cried, and I realised that he was affected by seeing what Christ did. And it should be what every man and woman and child should experience as well. You should want to run from the cross. Run from it because of the violence. But I think when you begin, the more that you begin to understand Christ and why he had to do what he did, you run towards it. Right?
Yeah.
So I grabbed him and I said, "Look at that man. That there is the strongest man that ever walks upon the earth, and the strongest man that ever will."
Amen.
His willpower, I said, "Did you notice that he didn't scream or cry
or beg for his life?
Or beg for his life, or, you know, he may have groaned, I don't know, but he never once, he was to undergo what he did. And even after all that physical violence that we see, You said that a lot of people look at Christ as being mamby-pamby and wishy-washy and thin and wearing a little toga and walking around in sandals. But you and I know that he hung there for our sins. And just as a note, or a little bunny bite as I would call it, instead of a rabbit trail, it's a bunny bite I like to call it. Jesus Christ was the only one, the only man, because he was fully God and fully man.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
He had to be to take our place and to pay for his sins, being man, but being God to accept it. It's an amazing, wonderful mystery. But when he was there, in that moment, when he looked to the Father and said, "Why have you forsaken me?" He was the only one in history, the only man, the only human being that had absolutely zero hope. He had no hope. He took the sins of the world upon him, and it's so deep that a person cannot grasp it, but he took those sins and placed them on himself. And because God cannot look upon sin. So when God looked at him, and Christ said, and he said it, I believe, out of utter hopelessness, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
The only one in history of mankind, of the universe, that was truly ever alone.
Alone, absolutely.
The word says, even if I make my bed in hell, you're there. But with Yeshua, his Father turned his back on him, and he was literally alone. And besides the lake of fire, godlessness, being out of the presence of God, is a definition of hell.
Right, and it's a great mystery, and I'm not sure how long he, what took place. That's beyond us. But I'll set that aside. But yeah, you brought up my son. He's a man now of 27 years old, and he's got a great love and affection, and is learning about the things of Christ. And I think that when a man when you bow before God and present your heart and your life and your soul, and ask Him for forgiveness of your sin, you'll become a man.
Yeah.
You become a man here on this planet that you were meant to be. If you look at family values, there was a great respect for the church years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was. I've asked around. In Scotland, in the county I'm from, the doors are never locked. They're never locked. But I understand here as well they were never locked, but now they're locked.
Yeah, because of vandalism and disrespect.
And a lot of it you have, a lot of young people that, God bless them, they have no... If you don't grow up in that upbringing, how are you going to know?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I'm hearing is, and I believe it affects a family, it's that right to say, well, it's my right to teach my child or do what they want. I think when they get old enough, they'll decide for themselves. But if you don't sow the seed early, they'll just flow through the school systems.
And get indoctrinated. And
get indoctrinated with all kinds of stuff, evolution, and that's another topic. And, you know, I believe that God made it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't prove evolution because you weren't there. And maybe neither can I physically prove that God made things. But I tell you what, it's easier to understand that and accept it. But you're only given one side in school. And that's just one part. But and if you go back decades, and I'm talking probably now maybe 50 to plus years ago, 50, 60, 70, it was creation was taught in school. So there's that part of the aspect that when there's not a respect in a country for God, and make no doubt about the fact that Canada and the United States were at one time a Christian nation.
Yeah, Judeo-Christian values.
Judeo-Christian values. Yeah. So anyway, that to me, that spiritual aspect.
Well, and with having children make their own decisions, as you put it earlier, you know, children's brains are developing, and they're still developing even in the early 20s, from what I understand. So you can't just expect, oh, I'm going to let my child choose its own path, because they don't have the capability to do so. And just because you're instilling a certain worldview and values, Judeo-Christian values, let's say, it doesn't mean that you're forcing upon them. You're giving them a skeletal framework to build their life and to build their values on, and then they can choose. Because, you know, God is the ultimate lawgiver. He's our creator. He made all the rules. Therefore, He is our creator. He has the right to make right and wrong and moral absolutes, and He has the right to tell us what to do. So if we go by God's commandments and God's law and God's word, it gives us a framework with enough elbow room to still have freedom to be who we are. Exactly.
And it's kind of a ridiculous notion to say, and I've talked with a lot of young people, it seems to be coming more from the young, although this idea of no, I'll let them decide when they're old enough to accept whatever religion they may choose or whatever it is. But it's erroneous, I guess, to suggest that I'll let them grow up and I won't take them to church. I won't put them in Sunday school. I'll not use the Word of God because they can't seem to make up their minds.
But yet, they'll let the iPad, the Nintendo, the television, the Netflix to influence and indoctrinate them.
Exactly. Give this man the money from the bingo because he just won. He just won. That's what it is, exactly. And it's hypocritical, I guess, of people to have this notion, oh no, I'll let them learn. As well, the statistics are out there as well. That and I'm not against women out in the workplace. That's foolish. But every decision that's made has a consequence, and it costs you. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
You can invest. You can spend money and invest, and it'll make you or break you. Right? You wouldn't just throw your money into a hole or throw it out into the brook or the river or something and expect it to come back to you some magical way.
Yeah.
But so we try to do a good job investing that way for our retirement and stuff, but when it comes to children, to not give them something that's absolute, even if you gave them both sides, and they're not doing it.
Well, you know, the Torah tells us in Deuteronomy, it says about God's law and His instructions, to talk of them when you get up, when you lay down, when you walk on the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, write them on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. It's telling us to pass this down, to teach it, to transmit it, not only verbally, but with our actions.
And it's not being done.
No.
I was leading to the fact that, we talked about investments, or as you say, how can you do that if mom's out working 8 to 10 hours a day and so's dad's working? There was a term that was brought about probably 30 years ago called latchkey children as well. And that came about because a lot of times the man and the mom and the dad have to go out to support the family. And I'm not so sure that really needs to be. Yeah. It seems to me back 40 years ago or what have you that, usually the dad, or some cases, if he couldn't, the mum would have a job, but there was generally one at home. The children grew up at a young age in the home. Now they're not. Yeah. Now they're being shoved by the tens of thousands, by the millions, into daycares and pre-kindergarten. I think they'll take them right out of the womb. Yeah. Well,
and I mean, I don't want to go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but let's say
the bunny bite.
Yeah, the bunny bite. The powers that be. They have orchestrated things to where we are no longer economically stable, to where both the parents have to work, and therefore there's no parental influence in the young life, and they're allowing the village to teach the children and the village values of the world to indoctrinate the children. And so this is all about what we're talking about family values.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to be a male chauvinist here. I'm not trying to suggest that. I don't know how to fix. I don't know if the problem will be fixed. But we definitely have a problem with values. Almost seems like a bad notion to many. Yeah. When you talk values, some will say, and this is another point as well, some will say, well, there's no absolute truth, right? Truth is what you make it. Your life is what you make it. Well, if you don't have values and still you don't think that values are valuable when these children are young, they grow up. They've grown up now. You've got probably about 2-3 generations, and when I think of generation, I think of about 20 years. Yeah. But you have these generations growing up that did not grow up with absolute or particular values. Some because the mum was tired and the dad was tired, and actually, again, going back, probably 40% to 50% of children are growing up without a dad,
If you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything.
You're going to fall for anything.
Well, folks, we call him the Scottish sage, but I don't think they call you that back home.
They don't call me that, no. They call me a different spice, but I'll not get into that.
Yeah, a prophet is without honor in his own country. So anyway, I think that's all the time we have for today. I'm so glad to have my friend with me. It's been such a rich discussion about family values from Angus McQuade, the Scottish sage, as Sean Connery would say.
Sean Connery, yeah.
Or Rowdy Roddy Piper would say. We forgot about Hot Rod. We got to pay our respects to Hot Rod.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm trying to wear a shirt. I don't know if I can see it.
Come with me if you want to lift with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that's right. It's not mine, by the way. It's Brother Chris, but it fits quite well. I think.
Yeah, I like it. It looks good on you.
Pretty good. Yeah, Rowdy.
All right, we're signing off.
Shalom.
Shalom.